Hello, welcome to the channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and don't forget to write a comment. Enjoy watching.
I was sitting on my couch, half-eaten Chinese takeout cooling on the armrest beside me, when my phone buzzed with the kind of notification that doesn't even earn a glance, until I saw the group chat name, Family Fun Time. My thumb hovered for a second, hesitant but curious, which tells you everything you need to know about my relationship with that group. I opened it. Just a picture at first. Chloe, beaming like a damn toothpaste ad, holding a coconut drink with a tiny umbrella, wearing a bikini that probably cost more than my last week's groceries. Behind her, the turquoise water stretched out into a horizon so clear it looked fake. Then the caption, "Birthday girl finally in paradise." That was all. No mention of me. No wish you were here. Not even a passive-aggressive nod. Just celebration. Then, a few minutes later, another message popped up, this time from my mother, casual as if she were texting about laundry detergent. "Oh shoot, we totally forgot to invite you." With a laughing emoji. Like it was hilarious. Like it was a hoopsie, not a slap in the face. Not a 29-year-old woman sitting alone on a Friday night, watching reruns of a show she didn't even like just to hear human voices in the room. I stared at it, reading it again and again, waiting for some kind of follow-up. Maybe a just kidding, or we meant to surprise you, or hell, even an apology. But nothing came. Just silence. Digital, neon blue silence. My hand started shaking, and I wasn't sure if it was from anger, humiliation, or the sudden realization that I had officially become background noise in my own family. It wasn't the first time they'd made me feel like this. But it was the first time they didn't even try to hide it. That's what hit the hardest. It wasn't that they forgot. It was that they didn't care they forgot. And the worst part? I wasn't even surprised. Hurt, yes. Stunned, no. Somewhere deep inside, I think I'd been expecting something like this. That's the kind of expectation you build after nearly 3 decades of being the backup singer to your sister's lead role. Chloe's always been the shining one, the golden daughter with her endless charm, and those eyes that make people believe she's sincere, even when she's lying through her perfect teeth. And me? I was the quiet one. The reliable one. The one who, as my mom once said in front of our neighbors at a barbecue, never gave us much trouble but never gave us much to talk about either. That sentence still lives in my chest, like a bitter stone I can't cough up. The Maldives trip was for Chloe's 24th birthday. A surprise getaway, they'd said in earlier conversations. They hadn't told me much else. Just that they were going somewhere warm and Chloe deserved a real break after her hard year. Hard year, my ass. The girl got dumped for the first time in her life and decided that meant the universe owed her a resort suite with a private plunge pool. And of course, my parents, Bill and Karen, God bless their oblivious hearts, nodded along like it made perfect sense. So here I was, heating up General Tso's chicken and sipping room temperature wine from a coffee mug, while they were probably having lobster served to them by someone named Mateo. It was such a cliché it almost felt scripted. Only this time, the punchline was me. I didn't cry. That might surprise you, but the tears stopped coming years ago. When you've spent a lifetime being quietly sidelined, you stop reacting like the hurt is new. Instead, I got up, turned off the TV, and stood in the middle of my living room, letting the silence settle around me like a fog. That silence, uncomfortable, heavy, familiar, was louder than their laughter in that photo. I didn't reply to the text. Not because I didn't have anything to say. I had plenty. I wanted to scream, to send a string of curses that would make my father drop his gin and tonic. But what was the point? It wouldn't change anything. It never had before. They'd shrug, make some half-hearted excuse, maybe send me a souvenir mug with a dolphin on it, and call it even. Instead, I did something I'd been rehearsing in my head for years, but never had the nerve to actually do. I opened my closet, pulled out the suitcase I hadn't used since my last failed attempt at a vacation, and started packing. I wasn't crying. I wasn't screaming. I was methodical, calm, focused. The kind of calm that comes after the storm, when everything's already broken and there's nothing left to lose. I packed light. Just the essentials. A few outfits. Toiletries. Laptop. Important documents. And one small box of keepsakes, photos, letters, the birthday card Chloe made for me in 3rd grade before she learned how to be cruel with a smile. I left the rest. The furniture, the books, the dishes. All of it belonged to a version of me that kept hoping they'd change. That version was staying here. I looked around the apartment once more. The beige walls. The worn carpet. The cracked frame of the mirror in the hallway that I never fixed because I kept thinking I'd move anyway. It wasn't a home. It was a holding cell. And they'd finally given me the key to leave. I turned off the lights, closed the door behind me, and didn't look back. I didn't respond. I just packed my bags. If you ask my mother to describe my childhood, she'll probably mention words like easy, low maintenance, or quiet, and then go on a long-winded tangent about how Chloe was always more spirited and sensitive and needed more attention. Like it was some medical condition that excused every instance of her being treated like a sunbeam while I was left to warm my own damn self. I wasn't neglected in the way that gets headlines. I had clothes. I had food. I had a roof. But it's possible to be completely provided for and still feel like no one sees you standing there with your hand raised in the back of the room, hoping someone finally calls your name. I was 5 when Chloe was born, and I remember my mom saying something about how I was going to be such a good big sister, as if the title came with instructions or some kind of medal. What it came with, in reality, was silence. A lot of being told to wait. A lot of "not now, Lauren." A lot of watching them light candles on Chloe's tiny birthday cakes with sparkly decorations and realizing I didn't even get balloons for mine that year. I remember being 7 years old and handing my dad a drawing I'd worked on all afternoon, a crayon masterpiece of our family standing under a big sun. He looked at it for half a second before Chloe, who was 2 at the time, walked in with marker all over her face and a shredded magazine in her hands, and suddenly my picture didn't matter anymore. That was the first moment I understood what it meant to be second. Not second place, not even second best. Just second thought. It became a pattern that was so predictable I started to flinch before it even happened. School plays? Chloe had a starring role in her kindergarten production of The Very Hungry Caterpillar, so naturally my 5th grade solo in the choir concert didn't quite make it onto the family calendar. She brought home participation trophies, and the house practically erupted in cheers, while I graduated high school with honors and got a lukewarm, "good job, honey," while they tried to figure out if they could make it to her volleyball practice on time. And birthdays? Let's not even start on the birthdays. When Chloe turned 16, they rented a cabin, hired a photographer, and let her invite 20 people for a weekend retreat that looked like it was sponsored by Pinterest. When I turned 16, we had lasagna in the kitchen and a cake from the grocery store that still had someone else's name faintly scratched underneath the frosting. I wasn't supposed to notice. But of course I did. I was 11 when I found out Santa wasn't real. Chloe was 6. So she had, 7 more years of magic? Lucky her. And yes, I realize now that math doesn't check out. But I guess I wasn't getting top marks in attention either. The point is, there was always this invisible measuring stick held up between us, and I kept falling short of something I didn't even know we were competing for. My parents weren't cruel people. That's the hardest part to explain. They didn't beat me or scream at me or tell me I was worthless. They just forgot to show up. Emotionally, spiritually, sometimes even physically. They loved me, sure. But they loved Chloe out loud. And I think over time, I started to believe that if I just made myself smaller, quieter, easier, they'd eventually look my way and say, "Now that's the one we're proud of." But that moment never came. I got my first job at 16, not because I needed the money, but because I wanted to buy my own damn birthday cake the next year. I put myself through college. No party. No family photo in front of a dorm. Just a ride in a car that smelled like fries and a suitcase with a busted zipper. I didn't even get a "we're proud of you" until I landed a decent marketing job, and even then it came with a half-hearted, "well, at least you're not still temping." And still, I stayed. I kept showing up. Holidays, birthdays, family dinners where I got asked the same tired questions every time. Still single. Why don't you dress like your sister? Have you thought about growing your hair out? I laughed it off. I told myself they didn't mean it. I told myself maybe next time they'd see me. Maybe next time they'd choose me. But 29 years of maybe next time adds up to a kind of sadness you don't realize is poisoning you until you've already swallowed it. And somewhere between Chloe's Maldives pictures and my lukewarm leftover noodles, I realized something that hit harder than any insult ever could. They didn't forget me on accident. They forgot me because it was easy. They forgot me because I trained them to. I made it convenient to ignore me. I made it comfortable to choose her. I gave them the benefit of the doubt so many times that they assumed I didn't even need it anymore. And maybe that's on me. Maybe I should have yelled more. Slammed doors. Worn something short and loud and impossible to overlook. Maybe I should have crashed the damn birthday party. But the truth is, I didn't want to be seen like her. I wanted to be seen like me. They made me feel like an extra in my own life. So I rewrote the script. The morning after the text, I woke up in my apartment with the kind of clarity that doesn't come often, like I'd been underwater for years and suddenly remembered how to breathe again. It wasn't some movie-style montage of tears and dramatic suitcase slamming. It was quiet, cold, deliberate. I stood in the kitchen, poured myself the last of the coffee, and stared out the window at the same dull view of cracked pavement and sagging power lines I'd seen for 4 years. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I realized I didn't have to keep standing there. They were still in the Maldives, my family, I mean. Still sipping cocktails and slathering on sunscreen while pretending their eldest daughter didn't exist. And the cruel thing was, I think they genuinely believed I was fine. The reliable one. The independent one. The one who didn't need all the fuss. As if fuss was some sort of disease, and I should be grateful to have avoided it. But I needed something, too. I needed to feel like I mattered. And when that last drop of coffee hit the bottom of my mug, something inside me clicked into place, solid and unshakable. I was done waiting to be invited. I'd invite myself to a life they didn't get to witness anymore. I started with the power company, then the gas, then the water. I made the calls calmly, politely, as if I were moving across the country for a job promotion. The woman at the electric company asked for a forwarding address, and I told her there wasn't one yet. There wouldn't be, not for them anyway. Then I listed the couch on a resale site, followed by the TV, the desk, and that armchair Chloe once spilled wine on and never apologized for. By the end of the afternoon, half my living room had disappeared into strangers' pickup trucks, and not once did I hesitate. Some people would have cried. Some people would have called a friend and begged for someone to talk them down. I didn't. I didn't want comfort. I wanted detachment. I wanted the silence that comes after a scream no one heard, when you finally realize you're the only one left to listen to yourself. I boxed up the things I'd take, essentials only. Clothes, laptop, toiletries, a couple of books, my grandmother's necklace she gave me before she died, and a tiny black and white photo of me at 7 years old, standing beside a birthday cake that barely fit my name. Everything else? I left it, but not without intention. I printed one photo before I went, an old one, glossy and large, of Chloe standing in front of the fireplace with that smug, polished grin she perfected around age 15. I'd always hated that photo. It had hung in my parents' house for years, framed and spotlighted, while any picture of me had somehow migrated to the hallway near the laundry room. I placed it carefully on the living room shelf, right in the center, facing the door so it would be the first thing they saw. Then I stuck a neon pink sticky note to the corner of the frame, wrote 6 words in blocky black ink, and stepped back to admire the final scene. One of us had to go. It felt like punctuation, a clean, decisive period at the end of a sentence I'd been forced to read over and over again for nearly 3 decades. I left the keys on the counter. I deleted the family group chat. I blocked their numbers one by one with the kind of care you usually reserve for defusing bombs. I didn't want to give them the opportunity to explain or defend or gaslight me with their classic lines, "We didn't mean it like that," or "You're being too sensitive," or the absolute worst, "Why are you making such a big deal out of this?" No, they didn't get to explain this time. This wasn't a conversation. It was a message, carved out in silence and absence, broadcast by what was no longer there. I figured it would take them a day or two to realize I was gone, maybe longer. They weren't exactly known for noticing things unless it affected their comfort. But once they saw the apartment stripped bare, the utilities cut, and the framed picture with its razor-sharp little note, it would hit them like a wave, and this time, I wouldn't be the one drowning. I didn't run. I didn't flee in the middle of the night with tears and regrets and second thoughts. I walked out in broad daylight, head high, spine straight, leaving behind every hope I ever had that they'd finally come around. It's funny how, after all those years of being invisible, disappearing was the loudest thing I'd ever done. And sure, I could have left a letter, something poetic and scathing, something that would haunt them every time they closed their eyes. But no, they didn't deserve that much of my energy. The sticky note said it all. They'd read it. They'd look at Chloe, frozen in that perfect photo, and they'd know. One of us had to go. And for once, I chose myself. It should have felt like closure, but it didn't, not quite. It felt like the end of one long, bitter chapter. And I had a feeling the next one wasn't going to be about healing, not just yet. Because while I left the apartment behind, I didn't leave the anger. I didn't leave the years of being ignored, sidelined, minimized, and second-guessed. I took that with me, packed it up tight, and carried it like a torch. They wouldn't hear from me again. Not today. Not tomorrow. But revenge? That was just starting to simmer. They came back from paradise tanned, relaxed, and completely unaware that the center of their little universe had shifted while they were gone. I imagine they rolled their suitcases through the front door with that post-vacation glow still lingering on their faces, ready to unload stories of dolphins and beach massages, maybe even a mild sunburn to complain about as proof of fun. What they weren't ready for, what they couldn't possibly have predicted, was the hollow echo that greeted them when they stepped into a place that used to feel like mine too. I wasn't there, of course. The furniture wasn't there either. The place was stripped of any trace of me except for the photo of Chloe, smiling like the queen she always thought she was, with that bright little sticky note perched on the corner of the frame like a sarcastic bow on a loaded gift. One of us had to go. 6 words. No explanation. No apologies. Just clarity. I can only imagine how long it took for the truth to settle in. Maybe at first, they assumed I'd moved a few things, did a little spring cleaning, maybe I was out running errands. That kind of denial is easy when you've spent years pretending someone else's pain isn't real. But the more they looked, the louder the silence must have grown. No shoes by the door. No half-finished laundry in the dryer. No cereal boxes in the pantry. Not even my off-brand shampoo in the shower that Chloe used to mock behind my back. And then the realization. The sharp drop in the stomach. The questions spilling out like a faucet turned too fast. Where is she? Did she say anything? Did you know she was moving? Why didn't she tell us? They probably called me within the first 10 minutes. I know how predictable they are. My dad would have used his default tone, the one that pretends he's calm, but is really just holding back a storm of guilt he hasn't figured out how to name. My mom, I imagine, kept trying to rationalize it, pacing the hallway, holding her phone out like maybe it would magically light up with a message from me explaining it all away. And Chloe? Well, Chloe would have taken it personally, as always. The kind of personal that somehow turns every slight into a tragedy that revolves around her emotional reaction, not the actual event. She called me 7 times that first day. 7 full calls. Then 3 voicemails. The last one was crying, like full-on gasping between sentences crying. But I didn't listen to any of them. I saw the caller ID. I saw the texts. But the numbers were blocked before her mascara ever had a chance to dry. Because that was the point. They weren't supposed to reach me. They were supposed to feel what I'd been feeling for years, this hollow ache that comes not from being hated, but from being invisible. And I didn't stop there. I left breadcrumbs. Not because I wanted to be found, but because I wanted them to search. I wanted them to dig through the life they'd glossed over and realize just how much they'd missed while they were busy polishing Chloe's halo. In the junk drawer, I left a letter they would have to unfold by accident, written years ago but never sent, describing what it felt like to sit through a birthday dinner where everyone forgot to bring cake for the second daughter. In the closet, I left a single dress, my graduation dress, wrinkled and still holding the tag because they never showed up that day and I never wore it. In the kitchen, I left a coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Daughter," cracked at the rim, because I bought it for myself after one of Chloe's "She's just tired. Mom, don't be mad at her" interventions that made me feel like a guest in my own home. I wanted every drawer they opened to ask a question. I wanted every corner of that apartment to whisper, "You missed this. You missed her." And slowly, they'd have to admit to themselves that this wasn't some impulsive tantrum. This was a reckoning. For the first time, the silence wasn't mine to carry. It was theirs. And while they were unraveling, I was rebuilding. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere small. A little one-bedroom with more sunlight than I deserved and fewer memories than I needed. But it was mine. Every piece of it, chosen without compromise, arranged without anyone else's approval. And when I lay in bed that first night, phone off, blinds half open, the streetlight casting soft shapes against the wall, I didn't feel lonely. I felt clean. I'm not naive. I know this won't be the last time they try to reach me. Chloe's already tried through Mike. Yeah, she reached out to my coworker, which was a wild move, especially considering they've never met. He said she sent a long message filled with heart emojis and spiritual quotes about reconnecting. Classic Chloe. Always dressing manipulation up as concern. But he didn't reply, just forwarded the message to me and asked, "Do you want me to block her too?" I didn't say yes. But I didn't say no either. Because the truth is, I want them to stew. I want them to live in that uncomfortable space where they finally understand they can't access me anymore. That love, when taken for granted, expires. And no, I don't feel guilty. Not even a little. Guilt implies wrongdoing. Guilt implies betrayal. But what I did was a correction. A shift in gravity. A recalibration of value that was long overdue. I didn't vanish. I removed myself from a system that was never built to hold me in the first place. They will spin this. They will tell their friends that I'm going through something, maybe call it a phase, maybe blame the stress of work or the dating world or some other generic nonsense that makes them feel like the victims. But deep down, in the quiet moments when the house is too still and the fridge hums louder than conversation, they will know the truth. They forgot me. And you don't get to forget me. Not without consequences. Some people say closure is a conversation. Some people think it looks like an apology wrapped in guilt and served lukewarm over coffee at a kitchen table. But I learned a long time ago that some doors don't need to be slammed or locked. They just need to be walked past, slowly and deliberately, without ever turning around. And so, in the weeks after I disappeared from their world, I did something that didn't look like revenge on the surface. No fireworks, no screaming voicemails, no public shaming. Just a few boxes, a receipt, and a final note with my handwriting on it, though they'd never be sure if it was real. I started with the attic. It's always the attic, isn't it? The place where we stuff everything we can't face, but can't quite throw away. My childhood was buried in cardboard up there, trophies with faded gold paint, school projects preserved for reasons I'll never understand, birthday cards with crayon hearts, old recital programs that listed me third row center. Always just out of the spotlight. I went through each box slowly, not because I was sentimental, but because I wanted to feel the weight of what they thought they kept safe while they were actively discarding me from their present. There was the dollhouse my grandfather built before he died, which Chloe never cared about but somehow ended up with when they split our things years ago. There was my spelling bee medal from 4th grade, silver of course, because first place was always just slightly out of reach. And there were photos, hundreds of them, and I was in maybe 30. Mostly off to the side, eyes half closed, arms folded like I knew better than to expect the camera to find me. I boxed it all with care. Not because I wanted to preserve it, but because I wanted it to look like a donation, not a message. Not yet. I took those boxes, taped and labeled Household, Misc, and dropped them off at a local thrift shop, one exactly 12 minutes from my parents' house, the one my mother used to stop at when she felt like pretending she could be frugal for a weekend. I paid cash. Gave a fake name. Said it was from a relative who had downsized. They took the boxes without question, because in places like that, people are always getting rid of memories someone else can't carry anymore. And then I disappeared again, this time in the most deliberate way I could. I booked a one-way ticket to somewhere warm, somewhere blue and wide and indifferent to history. I chose a place where the salt air felt like erasure and the sunsets didn't ask what I was running from. I rented a room with a view, no neighbors, no schedule, and no cell service strong enough for guilt to reach me. It wasn't permanent. I wasn't planning an escape from the world, just from their world. I needed to be somewhere that didn't know Chloe, didn't care about who got invited to what, didn't ask about birthdays or traditions or who brings the pie at Thanksgiving. But I didn't leave them with nothing. I found a vintage postcard in a souvenir shop, the kind with a beach scene and faded font that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 90s. I wrote in thick black pen across the back, in the same blocky handwriting I'd used on the sticky note in the apartment. Guess who remembered to invite herself? I didn't sign it. I didn't write a return address. I just dropped it in the mail with their home address on the front and walked away, barefoot, the sand hot against my heels, knowing they'd read it with wide eyes and frozen mouths. My mom would probably gasp. My dad would probably try to brush it off like I was being dramatic, even as his fingers clenched around the edges. And Chloe? She'd probably throw it across the room before picking it back up and reading it again, slower this time, realizing just how intentional every word was. And the best part? They'll never be completely sure it was me. Sure, they'll suspect. Of course, they'll suspect. But they won't have confirmation. They won't get a reply if they reach out. They won't get a clue from social media because I nuked every trace of my online presence. Deleted accounts. Changed emails. Wiped the digital slate so clean they'd have better luck tracking down a ghost. That postcard will sit on their fridge for a while, maybe held up by a magnet from one of their vacations. Eventually it might move to a drawer. Then a box. But it won't be thrown away. That's the power of a mystery that hits too close to home. You can't quite let it go, even when it's burning a hole in your hand. Some might say I should have given them a chance to make it right. But what they don't understand is that you can't apologize for forgetting someone. You can only remember them too late. And once that moment passes, the door doesn't just close. It vanishes. I don't know if I'll ever see them again. I don't know if I even want to. But I do know this, every time they see a box of dusty trophies in a thrift store, or walk past a photo that should have meant more, or hear my name in passing and hesitate before they speak, they'll feel it. That pull. That sting. The truth is, I didn't vanish. I just became untouchable. Because sometimes the best revenge is silence. Sometimes it's a damn postcard.